All right, go ahead.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hammond, and I'm happy to be on This Is Your Superior Self.
Jonathan, my man. I had to
How you
have you
doing,
back,
buddy?
dude. I had to have you back.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
You're in Maui. Last time I talked, I think you were in Florida.
I was in Florida. I had escaped New York during the pandemic and went to Florida, which is it has its own set of problematic aspects, and was thinking maybe I'm going to move here because I was done with the cold, and then I just got really clear. What am I doing? I'm supposed to live on Maui. I've always supposed to live on Maui, and so it was helpful to have that experience because Florida was definitely not it. And went back to New York in the fall, and it started getting cold, and I was like, I'm done with that. And yeah, I moved here in January, so I've been here today is actually my 6-month
Ooh.
anniversary on Maui. Yeah.
I remember when you moved. I was following you on Instagram, and your pictures got a whole lot interesting, like a lot more interesting. Like it was just like beautiful, beautiful beaches. Like I'm like, man, this is awesome. And then I found out you moved there. Paul Seligan moved there. I'm like, I got to get my ass over there. Like, we went to the Florida Keys for our anniversary, my wife's anniversary, 10-year anniversary. And I'm like, this is awesome. But this isn't Maui. Like, this is like, I want to go to Maui. Like, I want to go over there. It's just a whole different vibe. And I know you've written a whole book about it. You have this whole concept of the energy over there. Can you explain to us like what it is? What is it about Maui that attracts you there?
Well, we have to go actually pre-Hawaii. So there was once, eons ago, a huge continent where Hawaii now stands in the middle of the South Pacific called Mu. Some people call it Lemuria, although Hawaiians wouldn't call it Lemuria. And Mu was this continent where it's been said that the Mu people, and they weren't really people, they were beings, these off-planet beings who were attracted to the water here. And they were attracted to the water because water holds memory. Water is the DNA of the planet. And so these off-planet spiritual beings who at the time wanted to infect the earth at a time when the earth was waking up to love, with love, came specifically to this place because they were attracted to the water. Of course, this is spiritual anthropology. There's no proof of this, but it's in the folklore and in the stories. And so this place was either the originating place of esoteric wisdom that spread throughout the world, or there are some theories that this place is the conglomeration of esoteric wisdom from around the world that sort of all came here. But when you come here, you just feel a sense of that it's a vortex, and it's no coincidence that everyone's running around here saying aloha to each other, shouting love at each other, because there really is a sense of real gratitude in the people that live here in just being here. A native Hawaiian said to me, what makes a Hawaiian Hawaiian is their love of the land. And that very much feels like something. And I had a series of experiences here. I was a shamanic practitioner, although my focus was not on Hawaii. I just happened to come here on vacation and kept coming back here. And I would have these experiences on the land, visitations and downloads and divination with the waves, where I would have a thought and I would think, is that true? And then a wave would either be really, really small to indicate, no, it's not true, or would slap me in the face, or it would, and I had this communication with nature here that I'd never experienced anywhere else. Having studied with shamans on 4 different continents, this was the place that really congealed something for me. And so I began looking into Hawaiian spirituality, and came across Huna and the 7 principles of Huna, which were in some ways opened my eyes to what it was to think like a shaman. These 7 ideas that once I discovered them, I thought, aha, this is all shamans that I've worked with in South America and Central America and the Far East. They all tend to think this way. And but I would have never put my name on it, nor would I have known that there was a sort of elegant structure to these ideas that come from the heart of Polynesia. And that's why I called my book The Shaman's Mind, because it's using these ideas to merge oneself with one's own mind, with the mind of the shaman, with the magical thinking of the shaman.
Mm. So we were talking about manifestation, right? Like we talked about your background and before the show in the green
Yeah.
room, and you were talking about you're a blue collar guy from Michigan, right? Like you've been able to manifest this reality, which we all been able to create a reality, right? Like this reality that we're living is a multiple choices that we made consciously or subconsciously. Like so I've created this reality, but now I've made this decision. Like I am going to create consciously create the reality that I want for myself, whether that's taking the podcast to the next level, moving myself to Maui, being your neighbor, um, and podcasting right there where you're at. But you talked about some of the 7 steps that you utilized in your manifestation, right? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah, there are a couple that come to mind that are really important. The first principle of Huna, these all come from Hawaiian words, and the first principle is translated, and these are translations from my teacher Serge King, as the world is what you think it is. The world becomes what you think, what you're thinking. So not just your experience of the world, but that the world itself, that reality itself, that your reality shifts and changes based on how you think about it.
Mm.
When you think about, we're entering into different realities all the time. You go to one place and a certain group and they're subscribing to certain ideas, and everything adheres to those ideas. That's an actual reality. You go to a Trump rally, that's a reality. Everyone's thinking in the same way. But because of the power of the mind, we can use our thoughts and our beliefs and change our thoughts and our beliefs to ones that are congruent with the reality that we want to create. And so if I want to move to Maui, I have to have thoughts and beliefs and expectations and assumptions and rules that indicate to me that Jonathan can move to Maui. And so whatever inside me and whatever I have habitually thought that is incongruent with that, that's what I have to look at, and that's what I have to change. So that's the first thing, is that we create reality with our thoughts. You've heard this before, but it really is true. The other principle that really comes to mind is a Hawaiian word called makia, and that means that energy flows where our attention goes. So where we place our continued focus and attention, elicit energies, creative energies from the universe that bring to us the nearest available and physical equivalent of whatever we placed our focus and attention on. So we talked earlier in the before we got on about the myopic focus that I had about moving here, and that lending my consciousness, lending my attention to Hawaii through the book that I wrote, through watching everything that I could possibly watch in terms of documentaries and reading about Hawaii and learning about spirituality. And that was all to bring about the creative energy that would lead me to actually live here. I think I'm the sort of guy that has to merge with wherever I'm living to such an extent that that I feel comfortable. And there was something about, take it how I mean it, but becoming Hawaiian enough to live here in a way that, because it is such a big move, it's the most remote place on earth, and becoming Hawaiian enough to really understand what that means. And I'm still in that process. But a lot of the experiences that I had with the land were about remembering something about myself that connected me here before my conscious awareness. And I think a lot of people have that experience with this land.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. There's something about it. Like I am drawn there. Like I just have this vision of me sitting out there in the backyard and looking at an ocean. Like I just want that. That ocean is so important to me because that energy is just so vibrant. It's so powerful. Even like I was running and I was looking at a sunrise, and there's this lady who sometimes goes out and it's a field and there's some houses next to it, and she just goes out, happens to be out there when I'm out there, and she's like this is the most energetic part of your day, because that's when the sun is coming up. It's coming up, it's pushing itself over the horizon, and you're feeling that vibration, that energy from the sun, and it just cleans you. It cleanses you before the day.
Yeah.
And you know, like, and
So
that's
there's
what
a, there's
that's
a
what the
it's
ocean
so funny
does.
you're saying this. So there's a Hawaiian word called Hyena, and Hyena means intense breath, but it also means extreme heat, like the heat of the sun. And so Hyena is that breath that we have when the sun rises and we feel that. And it's also that breath when the sun sets, and it's a different ha, but it's a as the sun sets. And the Hawaiian language is amazing in that it doesn't just name things or depict experience, it actually brings about a felt reaction. And so that word hyena is about the felt reaction that we have to the sun.
Hmm.
Really interesting idea.
Yeah, well, I have a, I have this feeling when I see the ocean. It's like this. It's like, you know, I've heard so many people say that we are the ocean, right? We're the ocean, but our individual consciousnesses are like the waves, right? Like we are the ocean waving, and like I just never really understood what that was. Like I've heard that all the time, that this power is inside of us. Like know thyself, know thyself. Who are we? And it wasn't until recently where I started reading some more of Paul's new work. I
Mhm.
started reading some Suzanne Giesman, I think her name is, who channels a entity, Sanaya, I think, and some other books where I'm like starting to gain this Christ consciousness. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. I just learned about it, where you're starting to realize that, you know, you're Jesus and you are the same. Like you guys are the same thing, and he's just showing you what you're made of, right? Like you are a part of that source. You are that source energy. You're a part of that. You are just as special as that, and as powerful. And like it hit me, and I was like, whoa, like, because I've always never thought that I was good, you know, good enough, or I would never was powerful enough. Who am I to even compare myself to that power? But then it's like my conditioning, my entire life, that when I say God, I have this image in my head. I have this idea that he's this guy on a throne that is jealous, that is you got to be perfect in order to get to heaven, you know. And when I put God in that box, when I say God, I put him in a box. So God is not what I think it is, or he is, or she is. It's everything here, like the blade of grass, the rock, the information in between that is nothing, like is everything, and we are that. And like when I discovered that for myself, it was like whoa. And I feel the most, like I feel the most and in sync with that when I'm at the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the principles, the translation is there are no limits, meaning that there's no separation, that there's only one great big thing happening, and we are each an individual aperture through which that one thing experiences itself. So another way to think of it is that we're all the ocean, but that each of us individually are individual waves on the ocean that can't separate ourselves from the ocean. And if we are connected to the all, that means that we are connected to of all the higher intelligences as well. And those higher intelligences are available through us, you know, and that's really, you know, it's the nature of shamanism. Shamanism is about the reverence of nature and the intelligence, the energy underneath nature. If you think about nature, nature just wants to grow and create itself further. And anything that wants to grow and create itself further has one intention, and that's simply to experience more of itself. That's love. And if we can align our minds and align our stories with that, we are aligning with the same flow as that which grows the trees and that which grows the forest and that which moves the tides.
Mm.
And that is available to us. And we're not separate from that. And it actually takes a lot of work to get out of that, because we are of that same essence. And so for sure, that Christ consciousness within you. There's a kind of psychology called ecotherapy, which is basically psychotherapy outside. It's all about and it's kind of like a contemporary version of shamanism. And they talk about the ecological self. And the ecological self is like the Christ consciousness that we experience, the Buddha consciousness that we experience, or the experience that we simply have in that moment when we go outside and we feel our connection with the oneness, and we feel our connection with that infinite growth and creation of which we are an inseparable part. So there are a lot of different words for it, but that's in us. And then it's just about realizing that and aligning your life in such a way that you feel that more often than not. And the thoughts and beliefs and habits and wounding that blocks us from our own inevitable growth and creation, which is our essence, our birthright, is what needs healing and what needs our attention.
That's powerful. Yeah, our essence, right? Getting back to that. Like, but it was like maybe a day of that realization of like,
Yeah.
and you I guess it's what they call samadhi. I don't know, but my heart was on fire and I felt like I could walk on clouds. And it was like, then it was gone. Like it was back into the ego. And like, how dare you? Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, you're not part of that, right?
You know, my first Buddhist teacher, Lama Surya Das, I remember him saying, Lama Surya Das teaches Dzogchen meditation, which is this meditation into oneness, into just beingness. And he says you kind of only need 20 seconds, you know, because you can't do much up there. You know, in order for us to have experience, in order for us to have boyfriends and girlfriends and enjoy chocolate, we have to separate ourselves from the oneness enough to do that. But the visitation with the oneness, so that we know that we can always remember that we are part of that deep connectedness, you really only need once. And then it's about organizing your life in such a way with the idea that you've experienced that. Yeah. So I wouldn't think of it in terms of that there was a retaliation from your ego that said, how dare you? I think it's more that like, no, you still got to come back here and betray, you know. But that infinite connection is there, you know.
Yeah. No, I get it. Well, I've been going through like a transition anyway, you know, just kind of like my higher vibration, you know, the higher that I get vibrationally, like the old self dies. Like that's just the natural order of things. So and it's the same thing with the earth, you know, the where we're at now, society and mankind. I think you're seeing that shift, and you know, people say, oh, there's an awakening. I really do feel like there's an awakening, but it's a higher vibration that everyone's like achieving. And it's like, you know, that's why you're seeing a lot of rioting. That's why you're seeing a lot of bad things, because that is coming to light. The darkness is being, you know, shown the light. And I think that was hard for me because I was struggling with that. Like, I just felt like, there was a huge change. Like, I was losing a lot of older friends, but it was like I was just vibrating on a different level than they were. Like, so they were, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't leaving them. I was just vibrating differently than they are. And I was, you know, attuning myself to people like yourself and other people that are kind of at that level. I don't know. Did you ever find that for yourself? Like, you just find like, you know, I don't know, you might be doing it now. I don't know. But did you ever feel like you were like, kind of like looking around, like what's going on?
It's the nature of spiritual growth is the renunciation of convention and of everyone else's rules and of the need to assimilate, and releasing yourself from the structures that are in place that we're born into. You know, Carl Jung, who to me is sort of the shaman of the 20th century. He wrote a book in 1951. And in 51, he said that in December 2020, which is just this past December, we would begin the Age of Aquarius. And he talked about the previous 2,000 years as the Piscean age. And he characterized that age as a time when, with the birth of Christ, that humanity would be in a battle against good and evil, a battle that we would lose because we never got there. We never got there. But that in December 2020, we would be entering into the Aquarian age, which is the age of individuation. So that means rather than transcend our darkness, we are integrating. At least the invitation is to integrate our darkness. And so much of what's the energies that are bumping up against each other right now is that all of this darkness, these unconscious energies that have previously been relegated to the shadow are coming up for us each individually to look at. And I feel like COVID was so much a part of beginning that process. And so the people who are waking up are the people who are owning themselves and owning their stuff, owning their shit, owning the fact that they are divine beings, owning the fact that we have work to do on the planet, owning the fact that the individual choices we make reverberate and affect the collective. And that is the process that we are, at least Jung believes, for the next 2,000 years that we will be in. That it's not about transcending the bad, which never worked. It's about actually integrating it and owning it. And in that way, we also own our good in a different way, because we own and accept our shadow and yet choose not to live in it. It's a really beautiful idea. And I think that's what this time is about. And so people who are, because the experience that I've had in my private practice with all my clients is that the last year and a half, everyone's waking up. Everyone's moving to Maui, the proverbial Maui. Everyone is leaving the relationship they're supposed to leave, leaving the job they're supposed to leave, reconfiguring what they do for work and how they do it, reassessing their values. And, so there's this huge evolution and this huge devolution happening at the same time. We can feel it, and we can see the people who aren't waking up to the possibilities that are being presented to us, because on some level, we've been given the opportunity to choose our own truth. Donald Trump did something amazing, and I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but he did something amazing. He put out in the consciousness that there's no such thing as truth. Now, he wasn't being an evolved being by doing that. He did it because I'm going to commit this crime and hope you don't believe it, But what he did by infecting the consciousness with there's no such thing as truth is he invited us all into the idea that truth is a highly subjective experience. And that we all, as we are evolving, need to decide what is true individually for us. And that our individual truth is based on what works. And so Donald Trump actually infected the consciousness with the seventh principle of Huna, which says that what's true for you is what works for you. Mm. And that's an entirely different way of thinking about things. And that's where I think that for some people they want the vaccine yesterday, and that works for them. For some people, it doesn't feel right for me, and that works for them. And the more that we can individually decide what is true for us, and you feel it, you feel your truth. It's a felt experience. The Hawaiians talk about the gut, our gut truth. They talk about that. It's called the na'au in Hawaiian, and it means in Hawaiian genitals and the second brain, and this instinctive part of us. And they liken it to the voice of God. And so that gut instinct that you have that says, this doesn't feel right, or this does feel right, that's your version of the divine speaking through you. And it's instinctual. And the more that we can follow that, and the more that we can feel into that, and to feel it, you have to divorce yourself from the shoulds and the sociological structures and the rules and all of that. Because there's something, we each have an inner compass that if we listen to it, is the voice of the divine within us, and it brings us where we're supposed to go.
I love that. The Oracle of Delphi said, "Know thyself," and know thyself. Shakespeare says it. Know thyself.
Sure.
What I've always kind of struggled with that, because how do you know yourself? How do you know thyself? And I know the quick answer: separate yourself from the noise, quiet down. And what Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychologists, psychotherapists, spiritualist ever, he had the quote, what was it? Be still and know that I am God. Right? He had that in his office or whatever. And I never really, I was like, okay, that's a great quote. Like, be still and know that I'm God. But it was until recently where I'm starting to put it together, and it's like turning that inward, like be still and know that I am God. I am. Like, I am that word made flesh. Like, I am that. How do you know yourself? Like, how do you know Jonathan Hammond?
Yeah. Um, well, along the same lines, our divinity is wired. It's wired in our biology. We can feel it. And not to oversimplify, but I'm going to oversimplify. To follow your pleasure and to focus on what it is that you want, and to follow the pleasure without a hangover, actually lasting pleasure. You can feel that. There's a sense when you take an act that is congruent with your best interest, you have pleasurable feelings that accompany that say, this is right, this is the right direction, this feels right. When you do something that's antithetical to your best interest, when you self-betray, when you lie, whatever, you feel the feelings, the agitated feelings of that. And we are actually wired to feel that. The Hawaiians think of the higher self, or the ancestors, those who have come before and lived better than we did, or at least have come to understand something that we can't, as our conscience. That when our conscience speaks to us, that is the ancestors speaking to us. Hmm. So we're really wired to find our path. That doesn't mean, though, that it isn't difficult, because soul material, what's the word I'm looking for? Invested in soul material is risk. The reason why it's soul material, but the reason why I would make that choice is because it's fraught with risk. And that's how it's soul material, because it requires you to have faith to move in that direction.
Hmm. Well, you're talking about downloads earlier, right? Like, you're getting this information flow. I mean, you kind of have to have faith with that, right? Like, you got to know it's not you, right? Like, you got to know it's something else. Like, I feel like I meditate and I hear and I have visions and I hear things that I know that I want to have faith. I know the information's good. It's good for me. Mm-hmm. How long did it take for you to build that faith?
I didn't really have a choice. I didn't really have a choice. I mean, it was either succumb to my own demons and my own negative programming, or come up with something better. And if you think about the idea of spirit guides, whatever you want to call them, the benevolent energies that hover around the planet, and they wait around until someone asks for help. And then when you do, they're on it. And that's their entire purpose. Their entire purpose is simply for you to get lost, to call on them, and to know that they're there. And from a shamanic perspective, those higher beings are part of the energy of nature. And just like the energy of nature is always moving towards growth and creation, fueled by love, because what else would move towards growth and creation perpetually? That those beings are of that same material. And it's just simply a matter of asking and creating a reality for yourself that says, I am of that. That is where I'm choosing to vibrate. And that means that when things happen down here that we don't like, that we're looking at that always as a light bulb, as an opportunity. As there's a sense of that when something happens that we don't like, that's just a aha moment to see what we couldn't see before. And in that way, there's no such thing as bad news. There's no such thing as mistake. I mean, a cancer diagnosis. Because if you choose to look at it that way, you'll get to your next step. You'll get to the next step on your path. But there really is, you're either dwelling in the positive polarity toward growth, towards evolution, which seems to be the consciousness of the planet, because the planet just seems to want to keep going. despite us
Mm-hmm.
or not. And that's always your choice to make, the choice between the choice toward love or the choice towards fear. That book, The Course in Miracles, that's that thick. That entire book is really getting down to that choice in every moment.
Did you read that thing? That thing is thick.
Massive.
I got it, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know. I'll read chunks of it, but
I just gave you the Cliffs Notes version. That's probably good enough. Unless that's really your path.
yeah.
That's not particularly my path. But
Well, I mean, like, what was it? What was it for you, right? Like you're talking about, you asked for help. Like, what point in your life did you ask for help and put you on this path?
I remember I was about 20, 21, and I was in an airport, and at the time, 21, we're going back, how many years,
We're talking about like 2 years ago.
And I remember there was a book in the airport bookstore, and the book was called Feeling Good. And it was this yellow cover, and it just said Feeling Good. And I knew it was in the self-help section. And I thought, now that's an idea. Like, what's that about? Like, what, wait, feeling good, And I read that book, and I don't think I understood a word of it at the time. And it was so far away from where I understood myself to be and what the world was and all of that. But it was a process. It was a process. I was raised in a lot of fear. I was raised with no faith, zero. I was raised in once you're dead consciousness. And it wasn't working for me, and I just found myself anxious and scared and angry and stuck all the time. And there was this feeling of this doesn't feel right. This can't be it. And that began a search. And that's great. And I think everyone should be on their version of that. What the hell else are you going to do with yourself?
Yeah. No, you got to do it. It's your own path. Like, you got to go on your own, whatever that looks like for you. Like, I think we all end up at the same place. Like, we all end up together, and we're like, Jonathan, here, I meet you whenever the time comes, and it's like, man, you went that way, I went this way, but we're here at the same place at the end of it, right? Like, I mean, Ram Dass is like, we're all just walking each other home. I mean, it's
sure, right.
It's pretty powerful. I just think for me, it was through, like, I grew up Methodist and then converted over to, it's not really conversion, but it's like going over to Catholicism, and because of my kids and going down that path. But the more that I kind of like started learning more about who I was and what I was trying to be, even though it was very strict and had laws and restrictions on it, like, I kind of was like, I don't know, there's got to be something more, which turned me into self-improvement. I started stumbling upon psychologists, and I never knew that psychology had spirituality in it whatsoever. They just don't talk about it in mainstream. I started stumbling upon like past life regressions and near-death experiences and things like that. And I'm like, holy crap, like, all these people talk about these things, they all can't be wrong, even though there's no, like, peer-reviewed articles on near-death experiences. Maybe there are, I don't know, but this is what I want. I want this feeling, this, whatever this is, that bliss, that knowing. Like, I don't want to believe anymore. I don't want to believe if I'm perfect, I will go to heaven. I want to know what is out there. I want to know what that feeling is. And through this podcast, through my experiences, through my meditation, through my journey, I've had like 20 seconds of knowing when it started making sense to me. And now I'm just chasing that. And now I know that what we are, I know what it is that we're connected to, where we're from. And people kind of look at me, and I can't, and it's really tough because I can't really talk about it with a whole lot of people, because they look at you kind of funny. They're like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, it's very limited conversation that I can have with people, because it's like they're slowly awakening. Like, my wife is just coming around to like thinking about reincarnation. Like, she's like, I don't want to think about that. I just want to think we come here once and we go to heaven, because she's cradle Catholic. So I'm slowly getting her into that. But for the most part, I don't know if you experience that too, man. It's tough to have a conversation with people about some of this shit, dude.
Well, it absolutely is, I mean, I have a lot to. I'll tell you a story. So I have a woman who is a client. She's writing a book on the fairies, on the fairy realms,
Mm-hmm.
and how she came to the fairies. She was in New Orleans. She was watching a street magician, and the street magician had a group around him, and said, "Does anyone have $100 bill?" And it's significant. There was not $10 bill, but $100 bill. Someone had $100 bill, produced $100 bill. And so the street magician took the $100 bill and burned it up, and everyone's tittering and waiting for him to, And then he got this look on his face like, shit, I made a mistake and I just burned it. And in that moment, she felt all convention break down. There were some people who thought, wait, is he trying to take her money? Some people thought, is this part of the act? Some people thought, well, this must be a joke. Some people, and it was in that moment of unconvention where you couldn't find the rules, where you couldn't find the thing to hold on to, and he held it. Turns out he was actually just a really good performer and did eventually produce the bill. But in that moment where all convention broke down, the fairies came to her.
Hmm.
And it's in those moments where we disconnect from what we think we know. My shamanic, I've had two shamanic teachers say to me that the most powerful tool of the shaman is the imagination. Because the imagination is the thing that enters us into a reality that we create ourselves. And it's not fantastical thinking, because if you adhere to that reality enough and place your focus on attention on it enough, that reality, the nearest equivalent of that reality, will come into being. And so people on the spiritual path, they keep looking for evidence, and the evidence or someone tell me what's true and what's real. And it's so highly subjective. But if you can know that for instance, my totem animal happens to be a turtle. So when I go in the water and I swim with the turtles, which is just about every day, I can either go, I live in the land of turtles. Sure, there's a turtle. Or I can go, that turtle has a message for me. And when I choose that reality, the turtle has a message for me. And that is my imagination working. And that is my imagining a communication. And we know that everything is alive and conscious and sentient and aware. And I'm simply lending my imagination to that reality. And then reality mirrors that back. And that's what comes by dropping convention, by dropping what we think we know. The thing that I hate more than anything else is cynicism. Yeah. Just how's that working out for you? The cynicism does nothing. Just puts the kibosh on everything.
Absolutely. No, it's tough, man. It's tough. No, I love that. Right. Like, because the imagination comes from something else, comes from that creative flow. It does.
That's right.
That's how everything. Look at the laptop, look at the microphone, like everything came from that, right? I was looking at an airplane. I was like, they had to dream of that, or they had to think of that. They had to use their imagination for that thing to fly. Like, it came from somewhere outside of us. Like, it didn't come, we imagined it. So that had to come from somewhere. That had to come from the non-physical, the source. Like, it's just.
That's right. And if it came from us, that means that when I get on the plane as a nervous flyer, I make a point of saying, good job. I hope you're rested, because that thing is part of our consciousness. Yeah. So why wouldn't it have a consciousness?
Everything has consciousness. Even this desk, like this desk right here, is vibrating at an energy level, right? Like everything from the smallest particle has this vibration. The smallest photon, like, everything is God. Like, just to think about that just gives me goosebumps. Like, you look out, like, there's so many, like, there were studies. I think it was like a Lynn McTaggart book I was reading about the quantum field, and they were talking about a study or an experiment where this guy used like lie detectors. Like, he was like messing around one day and he had plants in his office, and he was like hooked the lie detector up to the plant, and like the needle started moving when he was having like, or moving towards the plant to harm it. Like, it was like this thing started going crazy. And then he brought another plant, and it's in the book, but he brings another plant into the office and acts like he's going to hurt the other plant. And the plant's like freaking out because he's thinking it's just weird. It's just crazy how all of life, everything has that awareness. Like, even the trees outside of my house, the grass, everything. Like, they have studies that show, like, when a tree is dying, the other trees will send it nutrients to help heal it, right? Like, I mean, it's incredible the world that we live in.
So influenced by thought, so influenced by consciousness, because when you break things down, there's not a whole, it's mainly empty space,
Mhm.
you know, and it's mainly empty, which means that it can be infused with our consciousness. There are all of these words in the Hawaiian language that are about the power of thought. Even the word for the human body in Hawaiian is translated as, one of the translations is a highly energized thought form.
Hmm.
That
Wow.
that even the body, even that which is the corporeal world, is made of thought. You know,
Yeah.
and which means that you can do so much with how you're tending to your mind, what you're paying attention to, what you're focusing on, what you're doing in the present moment.
What if the Big Bang was a giant thought? You know what I mean? Like thought, boom, consciousness. There we go. I mean,
I mean, I love that idea. You know, I mean, if at the very least, if the Big Bang went down the way science said it did, then that means that we are each made of star material.
yeah,
You know, so we can take that. We all originate from that. You
yeah.
know, so sure.
Yeah, I love that because like even like reading some of the new epigenetic stuff, like that's phenomenal stuff too. Like your thoughts affect your healing, right? Like I mean, it is 100% true. Like you look at it, right? Like even like Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, like talking about that, like you can definitely heal yourself. It's just you look at people and you think about, you can tell. I mean, there's just so many stories about how you get diagnosed with cancer, you get diagnosed with this, and like people instantly die within months. I mean, and if you have this mentality, like, no, I'm going to be positive. You start attracting that. You start growing, right? You get more positive energy going in your direction. Like, you have a really good chance of, coming out of this thing, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
people just assume, like, they hear the big C word and they're like, I'm done. I'm done. Like, it's crazy. I don't know.
I've never had the experience working with thousands of people. I have never had the experience where in one session we couldn't track a physical illness to its energetic source, its
Hmm.
energetic emotional source. Physical illness is simply symptomatic of the energy, not sometimes, always. And it's a hard thing for people to sometimes own, because the next thought is, wait, you tell me I created my cancer? Well, no, there's a lot of things we're not aware of. We do have an unconscious mind. It's unconscious for a reason, but on some level there is, at least according to the philosophy that I follow, the shamanic philosophy I follow, there is a degree of complicity with everything that happens to us, and that on some level, the more that we can own that for ourselves, the more choices available to us, the more choices to heal are available to us, the more possibilities are available to us. And so it's really important that that people really know that about their physical health. You know, I love Carolyn May. She says if you don't lie and you eat cat food, you're better off than a liar.
I like that. I want to use that. Oh man, that's awesome, dude.
I'm paraphrasing, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's I mean, I just think about it, like, even like the idea, like, be still and know that I am God. Like, think about how powerful you are. Like, you have that energy, you have that essence inside of you. Like, why can't you change your reality? Why can't you change your health? I'm looking at my kids today playing soccer. I'm like, man, like we've created that. Like my body and my wife's body created life. And people take that for granted. They just like, oh, here comes another baby. Do you think about that? Like that is a human being, a cell. Two cells come together and create this being. It's magnificent. I mean, it's so powerful. I mean, we are so powerful. We don't realize it.
Well, that, and not to mention your histories, not to mention your emotional life, your view on life, all of that, all of that is infused in that child as well. You know, the reason why we have a hard time following love, following the positive polarity, is that we learned, but good, that that's not us. And every child, even if you have the most progressive parenting and the most, the sort of most woke and attentive parents, on some level, every child, this is just the nature of being human, will constrict against themselves against the pain of the world on some level. On some level, they will learn to say no to some part of themselves. And we all have it. We all have it. And our work to do, and healing is around that. Yes, potential and possibility and your best life and your most inspired and aspiring self is available to you, but you may have programming in there that you did not choose that won't allow you to get there.
Is that a generational thing?
Generational thing. And even I once I worked with a woman, she was 70 years old, and she could trace her stuckness to a look from her father when she was 6. That there was one moment where she had a moment of unself-conscious expression, whatever it was, and she saw a look from him that said, I don't understand you. I don't understand what you are, and I'm embarrassed by you. Mm. And at 70 years old, she could go back there and remember that. And that was the seed of the way in which she didn't show up for herself. Every time she didn't show up for herself, every time that stuckness came up, that was its seed. And so we all have that. And so it's about really being aware that we all, it's work to get back to our wholeness. It's work to acknowledge that we are one with the all. It's work to acknowledge that we are a spark of the divine, because we learned that we weren't, and everyone did.
Yeah. Everyone, every world religion. I mean, everything. I mean, don't say that. You can get close to it, but don't say that you're one with it. Don't say you're at that level, brother, because no, you're not good enough. And you're right, absolutely right. I mean, you just think about it. I mean, I look out the window and I see a machine. I see a huge machine society, materialism,
Oh, yeah.
And until we can get away from that, until we can kind of get back in touch with who we truly are and how we can get back in touch with Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, and feel her and heal her, and along with that, heal ourselves. Like, I mean, I don't know, man. We have so much work to do.
Well, we do. And there is a vested interest by the power structures that put things in place that you never chose, to keep you small, to keep you from absolutely not acknowledging your own divinity. That is the nature of, I don't want to bash organized religion, but the idea that, there's this off-planet God, tends to be male, has good days and bad days, and judges, that paradigm, whether or not you adhere to that or not, the idea of the authority lying outside of you, the authority, look at that word authority, author is in that word, to author your life. That the authority, the ability to author your life does not come from within, but it comes from somewhere outside. Something outside of you is telling you what is possible for you and not possible for you. And we were all born into that. And is it largely money? Yeah. And power? Yeah. And part of our job is to really see that. In writing about writing about shamanism, particularly writing about Hawaii, I was tuned into indigenous mind, in that what occurred to me, and I had never had this thought, but what happened to the indigenous people in the Americas and certainly in Hawaii was awful. Awful, a Holocaust and worse. And one of the things that I became aware of as I tuned into their story and what was going on was that they simply did not have a consciousness as people connected to the earth, as people who worshiped the earth, connected to nature. They did not have a consciousness that would allow them to know that that could happen to them, because it's so unnatural. It's so unnatural. Even if even the idea of the hoarding of wealth. When the tiger eats the deer and the tiger's full, it drinks from the river next to the brother of the deer that it just ate. So this idea of hoarding, this idea of taking what isn't rightfully yours, it's not mirrored in nature. Dominion over, not really mirrored in nature. And so they didn't. This is my take. They didn't really have a context for what would happen to them, because it was just they couldn't even fathom it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, how do they? I mean, it's how they survived, right? Like, I mean, they survived, even though they were tribal, right? They had their own tribes, and they had different, obviously.
They were perfectly fine without us from 17. When we got here in 1780, they were perfectly fine.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, you think about it. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know, but I mean, it's like they shared amongst themselves, and that's how And they were connected with nature. They were connected with all things, and they didn't take. They didn't, take more than what they needed. They just kind of and they gave back. And where we came in, Europeans, not bashing on my heritage, but damn, man, like, when don't we, when don't we overuse? When don't we overdo things and take more than what we're supposed to? Like, we do this all the time because it's like, I gotta have more. I gotta have more. That egoic like idea of, if I don't have enough, well, guess what? I need to get more. Like, it's insane, man. Like, I fell into that. I fell into that because I thought that's what it was. It's like, the ego is like, you'll never have enough. You got to keep going more. Oh, you make X amount a year. Guess what? That's not enough. Like, you got to keep going and going. When is it enough? Like, when is it enough? When the earth is burning? Like, when we kill ourselves because of global warming, and when our technology is just the pollution from that alone, from just waste of cell phones and the laptops and computers, from just when we can't breathe anymore. Like, is that when we realize what we've done? Like, it's just so frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of enough, what we not martyr, not truly enough, is something that I think that if everyone can come to, it is in some way it pays some of that devastation of what happened to the original peoples forward. Because I think if you pull the lens back far enough, it's like we needed them. And despite the fact that we invaded them in some way, our consciousness has merged with theirs. I'm a Caucasian guy who wrote a book on Hawaii, and when people yell cultural appropriation to me, I at this point I just say, I get it, I'm sympathetic to it, but there's only one mind now. And all of this esoteric wisdom, all of this indigenous wisdom is there for the taking, not just because they've invaded, but because there is a spiritual design in that.
Hmm.
And it's only been within the last 40, 50 years that all of that material, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you name it, has been available to the masses. And we have to assume that during this evolutionary change into what Jung called the Age of Aquarius, where everyone would need a spiritual context in order to traverse the risk of the change, that all of that esoteric wisdom is there for a reason, and that the spiritual intelligences of the universe know what they are doing by putting us all in relation to it.
Yeah. When you hit that self-actualization, when you get those peak experiences that Young were talking about, that's when you realize the connectivity of everything. Like, that's when you find the connectedness of you and the universe, you with all things. You and I are one. I'm just speaking to myself over there. Like, that's when you start realizing how we're all connected. I'm not just talking about with humans. I'm talking about with everything. Everything. I'm walking tonight just along the woods, and I'm thinking, man, like, my consciousness and my being is a part of this right here. Like, everything, even the invisible information that's flowing, right? Like, I think once people start hitting that vibration, once they start hitting that levels of consciousness, that's when they're going to start making that turn, that inward turn, and they're going to say, I think it is enough. I think it's time for us to get back to finding out who we are, being, finding the heart, and connecting, in the heart being the bridge to that source. So, I mean, I'm really hoping, man, and this is why I do the podcast, you know.
People don't talk about this perspective enough, because when you think of altruism and contributing to the collective, that's sort of what we hear a lot about. But because there is only one thing happening, of which we are each an inextricable part, that means that what we do that is detrimental to our own best interest, the whole world is stuck with. And what we do that is cultivating our own growth and our own capacity for love, the whole world benefits from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really important thing to acknowledge. My teacher, Serge King, he says, if you want to heal someone, think of them and make yourself feel good.
Hmm.
And what he's getting at is just that we each have an individual part to play. And in any way in which you limit yourself, the whole world is stuck with that limitation. All the people that you were supposed to touch, all the people that were supposed to have benefited from watching you not be limited, they're all stuck with that.
Yeah. I can't remember where I heard it, and I wish I could remember where I heard it, because I would really like to give it credit. But instead of like, it's something with intention, like, passing that energy to someone. Like when you see somebody on the street who's a beggar or a homeless person, like if you don't have money on you, like have a good intention for that person. See them, visualize them having some success, because now you're transferring that energy, that intention to them, and in return you're helping yourself in the long run. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but it's like,
well, I've heard of it. That's part of the Huna philosophy. The Huna philosophy says that the unconscious mind that we all possess emulates other people's. In other words, what we hold unconsciously emulates what is being directed at us. So that means that a compliment goes right to that person's a silent compliment goes right to that person's unconscious mind. The unconscious mind can decide what it wants to do with it. But that essentially, one of the major practices in Huna is this idea of blessing that which, blessing everything. If you want more money, bless the things that money bought. You want a better body, bless the person who's got it. You want a better relationship, bless the one who's already got the relationship. You want a certain kind of career, bless the person who has that career.
Mm.
And in that you are being congruent with the very energy that you want to create for yourself. And in the same way, silent compliments, they work. Carolyn Mace wrote an amazing book called Invisible Acts of Kindness. And the whole book, this thick, is just about people thinking positive thoughts about other people and it affecting their lives and saving people's lives.
Hmm.
So it's amazing what we can do. It's amazing what we can do.
Well, bless you, Jonathan Hammond, because I loved every minute of this conversation. How can people find you? I know you have a course coming up soon, right?
Yeah, you can find everything at mindbodyspiritmaui.com or just jonathanhammond.com. I'll get you there too. And I have a course that's based on based on my book, The Shaman's Mind. It's called The Shaman's Mind, but I go into more detail through Glide Wing online workshops, and that's all on my website. You can find a link. That starts August 15th, and that's 3 weeks, 2-hour sessions each week, and you have individual work with me, and there's an online forum, and we really get into it, and you learn all this material there. So but the easiest way is jonathanhammond.com.
I love it, Jonathan Hammond. I love every conversation that we have because it's so insightful and just so inspiring.
Aloha.